Hello friends, it's your boy Chris. Welcome to my kitchen. Today we're doing a little sweet something in the kitchen today. But we're using something tart, very sour to do so. And this is what I have going here. And these are sour cherries that I've got in a sort of a sugar syrup with some red food coloring, some ginger, some cinnamon. The entire kitchen is smelling wicked. If it's your first time here watching me on YouTube, above you're going to see the subscribe link. Click on subscribe. All the latest videos are going to be sent to you. Leave me your questions and comments below, and don't forget to give the video the thumbs up. So here we go. We're using sour cherries to make something somewhat like a jam, but I mean, I say it's not typically, it's hard to describe what it is. However, it is nice and sweet and a little tang from the sour cherries. Sour cherries is one of those things, and I mean to say, it's also called gooseberries. It's also called, there's so many different names for this thing. It's one of those things that's very, very difficult to find in North America because they go bad so fast. My parents were down on the islands and they brought back some for me, so I thought I'd share this recipe that I grew up with as far as a dessert or a treat goes, something I enjoyed as a kid. So here we go, sour cherry jam. Let's quickly run through the ingredients here. Up front, a couple sticks of cinnamon. Smells wonderful. Something a little bit different, and this time here I'm using some grated ginger. That's about half a teaspoon to 3/4 teaspoon of that grated ginger, totally optional. Back here I've got granulated sugar, 1 cup of sugar. We're going to use that as a base for this, because depending on your tolerance for sugar, you may need some more than likely, because this is a very tart and sour sort of cherry that we're using. And speaking about sour and cherry, that's what I know these guys as, sour cherries. Depending on which island you're from, you will obviously have a different name for it. It's known by so many different names. In Jamaica alone, I know there's like 5 or 6 different names. In Trinidad, we call it sour cherry, gooseberry, cerise. There's so many names, and I know my friends in Barbados, St. Kitts, Dominica, just about everywhere you go. I had one person write in from I believe it was Grenada, who said they call it damsel, I think. There's so many names for it, but here I have 3 cups of that sour cherry, and we're going to need some red food coloring. I'm not sure exactly how much yet, but as we go along, I'm going to share that with you. And we'll also need some water. To finish off the dish, we'll need just over a cup of water, but to start with, we're going to need maybe about 3 or 4 cups of water to sort of take some of the tartness away from the sour cherry. To get some of the sourness or tartness out of the cherries, the first thing we need to do is to boil it a little bit, maybe for about 20 minutes or so. So in a deep saucepan here, I've covered everything with water. It's probably about 1 inch above the cherries as far as water goes. I'm going to bring that up to a boil, and then I'm going to leave that on a rolling boil for about 20 minutes to get some of that tartness out of the cherries. The water has come to a boil now, so I turn my heat down so it's like a rolling boil here, and I'm going to let that go for about 20 minutes. As I said earlier, it will take out a lot of the tartness, a lot of the sour sort of bitter taste out of these cherries, because these cherries are notorious for being sour. Other than making these sort of preserves with it, I can't say, you know what, it's also good in hot sauces, to be honest with you. If you're making those sort of like chunky pickled pepper hot sauce, as we make down in the Caribbean, these guys are good to add in there as well. So I'm going to let this boil for about 20 minutes. Then I'm going to drain all that water out, because we really don't want the water. Give it a quick rinse, and then we'll get to actually putting the recipe together. So it's been about 20 minutes here on that rolling boil. So what we're going to do now is dump that water out. Just going to turn the heat down and get my saucepan ready for the next step. Just going to drain these out. Give it a quick, so there we go. I'm just going to give it a quick rinse. And you will notice that it will start getting tender and start to break apart. So try to be a little bit gentle with it. I'm just going to rinse that out with some cool water. And I'm just going to pour it back now into my saucepan here. Then I'm going to put in the cinnamon, the sugar, as well as the grated ginger in there. Give that a quick stir. And remember, I said later on when you taste this, you will know if you require more sugar or not. At this point, it's going to turn into a sort of a syrup, and we're going to add about a cup of water to the pot here. Turn my heat up to a medium-high because we really want this to start boiling away for that to get infused with all that sort of sugar and syrup and everything else. And here is where I'm going to add the red food coloring. So I've got 2, 4, 6, 7, 8 drops of that food coloring in there. Give that a quick stir. And you really want this to be dark and rich red. So what I'm going to do is add a couple more. So in total you're adding maybe about a tablespoon of that food coloring, which may seem like a lot, but you really want this nice and red and absorbed. It's all about color and I guess a sort of tartness from this as well too. I'm going to bring this up to a boil and I'm going to let that simmer away for about half an hour or so. It's come back up to a boil now, so what I'm going to do is go all the way down to minimum because I want this to stew down for at least half an hour. You will have that lovely fragrance of that cinnamon all through the kitchen now. Remember to keep stirring it, which reminds me I've got to stir it just because we want that red, rich color to really pick up in all of these sour cherry. Here's where you can also hit it a pinch of salt, and that's exactly what I'm going to do, just to help balance off some of that tartness. Give that a quick stir again, and let that gently simmer away for at least half an hour. It's been about 15 minutes or so, and I thought I'd just give you guys a peek at it. It's still simmering away, but as you can notice, the cherries are starting to really absorb that rich red color. The syrup is starting to thicken up. So we're going to continue doing this for another 15 minutes, and then we may need to turn the heat up to burn off all that liquid to make it a bit thicker, a nice thick syrup at the very end here. But we're going to continue doing this, continue stirring it, another 15 minutes, and then we should be good to go. It's been half an hour now, so there's quite a bit of liquid still left here. So the first thing I'm going to do is remove the cinnamon sticks. You already got all that flavor out of there, so if you're worried about that, removing them at this point, no worries. Give it a quick stir, and now what we're going to do is crank up the heat to burn off most of that liquid, because all we want is a sort of a thick syrup at the end. I'm going to crank up that heat now, which I already did, and start burning that off. This is when you should also test for sugar. So what you do is you get a little bit of that syrup out of there, and you want it to be not tart, but just above tart, with a nice sort of sweet finish. So what I'm going to do, and I noticed that 1 cup of sugar wasn't enough here, because remember, there are times when these cherries won't be as sour as other times, so you have to be a little bit flexible. I'm going to add a couple tablespoons of sugar to the 1 cup of sugar I've already added in here at this point. Most of that liquid is gone now. I've got a thick sort of syrup on the bottom, so I'm going to turn my heat up because I know the more this cools down, the thicker it's gonna get. The cherries are starting to break apart. They're so tender. Now, a few things I gotta warn you guys about here. These, although I call it a jam, if you're gonna be using it as a jam on bread or whatever, note that on the insides of these there is a hard seed. This is not seedless. It is very hard and tough, and it can do some damage to your teeth. I remember growing up on the islands using this as a sort of a sweet snack more than anything else. As this cools down, it will get thicker. I'm going to allow it to cool down, and then I'll show you guys what the end product is. This is it here after it's cooled down for about 20 minutes or so. So as you can see, it really thickened up. And one thing I wanted to show you guys before we go, and I've been munching away on a few of these. Notice these sort of hard little grainy things that you're seeing here? Those are the seeds I was speaking about when I said the inside of these are going to have seeds. So be very careful when you're using these, if you're going to be using it as a spread. These are nice and lovely as a snack, as I said. Got a sort of a sweet, tart taste to it. And if you really, really want to kick things up quite a bit, add some hot peppers into here, some Scotch bonnet peppers or something. It'll give it that wicked Caribbean kick to it as well. Chris here, CaribbeanPot.com. Thanks for joining me in my kitchen again today, guys. It's always a pleasure to have you here, and I do hope you guys give this recipe a try, providing you can source these sour cherries. In the comments below, hey, tell me what you know these cherries to be called. I'd love to know what the different take on these cherries are as we go up and down the islands, well, the beautiful islands of the Caribbean.